Okay, today's channel is a request, and the question is, I've kind of paraphrased it, why are some countries rising up and awakening and others aren't? And there were some additional comments like, why is it in some countries where the oppression is the worst that there seems to be the least amount of pushback? And does that mean those countries aren't turning to the light or aren't awakening to the light? And so basically, generally, what's the dynamics? What's going on here? Okay, so, and I've summarized it into why are some countries rising up and others not. So let's see what we got. Greetings and thank you for the question. Why are some countries on your planet rising up against the COVID oppression and others are not? Let us begin by saying that non-uniformity is a characteristic of existence. It is essential for there to be a diverse array of experience that there is non-uniformity. If there was uniformity as a base characteristic of existence, then there would be much less opportunity for there to be experience. For example, if there was uniformity, then the universe itself would be symmetrical. And being symmetrical, there would be an equivalency or an equal nature, a sameness reflected in this symmetry. And this would mean that the experience which is occurring here would be exactly the same as the experience occurring in the reflected part of the symmetry. And so now there is redundancy, there is a unnecessary repetition, and the experience is less diverse and requires a much larger or different type of process for all of experience that is possible across all permutations to occur. So, in its wisdom, the One purposefully created the all in a very non-uniform way. And by having this non-uniformity, there is a much greater potential for a broad array of experiences and permutations. And this was essential to the design because the One wishes to know itself to completion through experience. Therefore, the greater the potential for permutations of experience, then the greater the fulfillment of the divine purpose, to know thyself through experience. So, looking at the microcosm of Earth at this time and what is occurring with the awakening, which is now being catalytically incited through the COVID pandemic and the authoritarian response, which is said to be for the safety of humanity, But for those who are awakening, it is becoming more apparent that it is instead for the enrichment of the authoritarians that are behind COVID, so that they become more consolidated in their wealth, power, and authority. The reason that there are some nations which are awakening faster than others is because of this non-uniform inherent characteristic of the one's creation of the all. So, when you look at an apple, and the apple appears to be a perfect apple, and even though you could say it is a perfect apple, when you look at it, you will notice there is not perfect symmetry, even though it is the perfect apple. There is a non-uniformity to it. And this non-uniformity is actually part of the perfection. Because the non-uniformity, as we have just described, is very important to the allowing of all permutation of experience such that divine purpose can be fulfilled. So, on this planet at this time, the reason that you will see there are some areas awakening faster than others is a literal fractal representation of this non-uniformity. So, even though there is non-uniformity, there is still a tendency or a flow or an arc in which all of this non-uniformity is heading towards. And it is heading towards uniformity. And this transition is a transition from non-completeness to completeness. A transition from separation to unity. A transition from not knowing thyself to knowing thyself to completion. Before the creation of the all, there was the one existing solely as a singular consciousness. And this singular consciousness was uniform. It was a oneness in all ways. There was nothing which was not uniform, which was not symmetrical. And it yearned to know itself experientially. And for this desire to be fulfilled, then there needed to be non-uniformity to return to uniformity. This is clearly the case because for there to be experience, there needed to be the illusion of more than one. And this illusion of more than one was a separation between what is and the illusion of something other than what is. There was a necessary state of incompletion to return to completion. If completion is uniformity, because the completed state is a return back to the original state. This is the completion of the divine purpose. And the original state was the one existing in a state of pure, complete, perfect uniformity. So, to create the context where there could be this transition, then there had to be a move away from the original state. A move away from this original state of absolute completion. And so, there was the transition from one to the illusion of many, and the transition of also from uniformity to non-uniformity. And these actions, these manifestations, were a shift from completion to non-completion. And this state of non-completion created the gap where there could now be a transition back to completion, to complete the divine purpose. And this transition back from non-completeness to completeness, from the illusion of many to the return as existing as one, from the state of non-uniformity to uniformity, requires experience. There has to be experience across this transition. And this fulfilled the divine purpose, which is to know thyself through experience. So, even though the earth at this time appears to have different nations responding in a different way, the ultimate transition is from non-uniformity to uniformity, because this is the natural arc of all of existence, as everything returns to full realization that it is in fact the one. So, this means when it is extrapolated across what is occurring on your planet now, is there is a transition from non-uniformity to uniformity. And your planet, although it is at the moment having this discrepancy where some areas are awakening faster than others, it is still heading towards coherency, because all of these ways that the one changed itself from the original concept was a shift from perfect coherency to incoherency. And so as everything moves from non-uniformity to uniformity, it is a movement from incoherency to coherency. Therefore, it is not something to be concerned about that perhaps the nation in which you reside is lagging behind in this awakening. The natural arc is from this non-uniformity to uniformity, to incoherency to coherency. So, all that needs to be done for you, the individual, is to remain focused on the light, to continue to be a being of light, to remain as much as possible plugged into the unity which is forming on your planet. And even though some nations will be awakening faster and staking their claim on birthright sooner than yours, perhaps, this is inconsequential. It is just a very natural manifestation of this movement from non-uniformity to uniformity, from incoherency to coherency, from the illusion of separation to the realization of unity. So, let us finish in this way, because we do not have much more to say on this particular topic. So this is going to be a short dialogue, a short channel. part of this non-uniformity, where you are discovering that your nation is awakening slower than others, is also due to the non-uniformity of those forces which push against the awakening. As non-uniformity is an inherent part of existence, then also those that push against the awakening also are non-uniform in their approach. And this has meant that they have used their strategies in a way which is calibrated to each nation. And because each nation is non-uniform, is different from each other, then the response, the way in which they have decided to inhibit and control and guide a particular nation towards their ultimate vision, this system of total and utter control, has been different. It has been calibrated to each nation, which is different from each other. But even those who wield darkness as a power and who are behind COVID, even they are moving from incoherency to coherency to non-uniformity to uniformity. Because their ultimate vision is to have one system which governs everything, and every individual that is permitted to continue to exist within this system will be so uniform that there will no longer be gender, there will no longer be nations, there will no longer be differences in culture and in currency and in language, but it will all shall be one absolute uniformity. And this is why it can be said with accuracy that they are playing God. They consider themselves to be the gods of this planet, because the ultimate return to coherency, the ultimate return to uniformity, reaches completion at the end of the all. When everything has coalesced back into full realization of itself as the one, will be the end of coherency, will be the end of non-uniformity. However, the cabal of darkness, those who follow the philosophical path of service to self, that are behind what is occurring on your planet at this time, wish to bring humanity to this place of absolute coherency, absolute uniformity, much, much sooner. And not as an organic occurrence, but through their own forced agenda, so that they can be the imaginary gods over your planet. So, if we to look at a nuanced understanding of what are the dynamics of this occurrence on your planet at this time, being the way that the darkness has been wielded to create this unwanted, this cold and sterile coherency and uniformity, versus those that are being the victims of this oppression. There is a natural arc back to this place of coherency and uniformity at the state of full realization of self as the one. And yet this is very far off in the distance using the measurement of time. Very, very, very far away. So, for humanity at this time to be aligned with its journey and where it is now in terms of this very larger purpose, which is the one's purpose, not the purpose of those dark aligned beings which are trying to control Earth now, but with the greater vision, the larger purpose, the ultimate purpose, the divine purpose, which is a return back to the one. There is still a very large window of non-uniformity, of incoherency, for there to be a very rich experience of all permutations of possibility, so that the one's purpose to know thyself through experience is fulfilled through the proxy of each of you as individuals and all of humanity as a single, unified, united being, the unity, the humanity being. So, the way that you remain aligned with this greater vision is to refuse to be forced into an inorganic coherency. Refuse to comply with this inorganic uniformity. Continue to bubble and percolate and be incoherent with this forced agenda. And by being deliberately incoherent, by being deliberately non-uniform in who you are as an individual compared to who they are trying to force you to be, creates a incompatibility between humanity and what between humanity is now and will be and can become, and what those who are controlling want humanity to be and to become. And by creating this and perpetuating this incompatibility, their system will fail. Their system cannot contain this incoherency, this non-uniformity. Their system can only survive and thrive and succeed if they are successful in creating an absolute coherency, an absolute uniformity. That will be the fulfillment of their vision of total and utter control of the human species. So, from this perspective, it's clear that your non-compliance is essential to humanity staying on this larger arc, which goes to the end of time when there is the full coalescence back into the one. Instead of being coerced and extorted into this much shorter arc where you have been forced into an inorganic state of uniformity and coherency. So, comply at your own risk. If you choose to respond to this forced coherency, where everybody must wear a mask, everybody must get an injection, everybody must have a medical passport, everybody must do exactly the same thing. Comply with that at your risk, because you will be pigeonholed into an inescapable prison of uniformity and coherency, which is inorganic and unwanted. And if their vision is as successful as they plan, then there will be no escape for you. And there will be no escape for your children. And then, in the years to come, across the human experience, when you will have the opportunity to be reincarnated, you will be incarnated into that system of forced uniformity, forced coherency. You will be born into a prison which you yourself created by complying at this time. Right now, at this very moment, in the human experience, is the opportunity to resist the forced uniformity coherency, and instead to stay aligned with this much larger arc across all of existence and all of time of non-uniformity, of incoherency, so there can continue to be a richness of experience, and divine purpose is fulfilled through the proxy of you. Therefore, do not comply with the inorganic push to uniformity. Do not comply with the inorganic push to coherency, because it is unnatural, and it will set up an environment where you are not a child of your God, but instead you will be a slave of those that have self-anointed themselves as the gods of humanity. Be a free being. Step into your birthright, your power as a beacon of the light, and form a unity with all those around you, with all of humanity, and let this unity be full of incoherency, be full of non-uniformity, meaning regardless of who another person is and how they appear and what they believe, recognize that they are part of the same being which you are. And so have a uniting energy for them to form the unity, even if they do not think of you in the same way, even if they still not have reached the place where they recognize that all of you are the same being, the unity, the humanity being. It does not have to occur simultaneously. You can make that recognition first, and they can make that recognition later. And then what you will have achieved is you will have created a unity of divine incoherency, a unity, a single being of divine non-uniformity, which is a rich vehicle for the continued fulfillment of divine purpose. Thank you, and we love you.